What are we going to do as a church? Our souls need to wake up. We need to respond to the gospel of Jesus. He said, go into the world.
We don't want to deal with reality, Christian. We don't even want to deal with reality, even though we've been saved from this place.
I'm calling on you today in the name of Jesus to rise up to the call of God. Christ is coming back soon.
If I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? People stop and think about it. If hell really exists, and it does, I didn't say that Jesus did, then don't you think people need to know about it? Can't you at least give them a fighting chance? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome to our show. Hey, if you want to find us, you can find us on dontletthemburn.com. Visit our Facebook page and you will see a litany of articles released every day, aggregated from news from around the world. I just want to encourage you to reach out if our program has affected your life in any way, even if you've gotten through our gospel message, the gift of salvation. Today we have Derek and Sharon Gilbert from Skywatch TV. On Skywatch you can find Derek on his daily show 5 and 10. And then Sci Friday is hosted by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. Derek has written over 3 books and has been featured as a co-author for other books, but here are the main ones. The Day the Earth Stands Still, which he authored with Josh Peck, The Great Inception, and The Last Clash of the Titans. And Sharon, who was featured on the DVD Inhuman, has her own series called The Red Wing Saga. And for the last guest host is Kevin Shrum. You all know Kevin Shrum. He's a friend of the show. And me and him, by the way, are working on a top secret project. You want to stay in tune for those details. And of course, I myself am working on a DVD called The Alien Deception, Entertainment Front Lines. Hopefully I can get that out this year. As of right now, we're in the pre-production phase, but keep a lookout for more trailers and news ahead. Now, hey, Derek, Sharon, and Kevin, welcome to the show. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Thank you for having us on, Chris.
Honored to be here.
Yeah, good to be here, Chris.
It's good to have you. Good to have you. For the listeners, tonight's topic is about the superheroes and the gods, or the so-called gods, the demigods, and everything that falls in line. You're going to get some revealing information from Derek and Sharon and the rest of us that might make your ears perk up or your mind just expand to the realization that our children and adults are being inundated with esoteric secret knowledge. As we go on, Derek, Sharon, what do you got?
Well, we talked on Sci Friday this past week about something that Sharon spotted. I totally missed this, but the director of the film Justice League,
Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder, the original director who had to leave due to a personal tragedy.
His wife, his daughter died.
Yeah. Was replaced by Joss Whedon, and the direction of the film changed. Not least of which, of course, was reshooting scenes with the actor who played Superman.
Oh gosh, Henry Cavill, who had a mustache for a Mission Impossible film he was filming at the time, and the directors and the producers from Mission Impossible wouldn't let him shave the mustache, so it had to be digitally removed in the reshoots.
Yeah, which is why Cavill's face looks weird in some of the scenes in Justice League. But anyway, for a charity, Zack Snyder released a t-shirt design that is very much like the Sephiroth, the Tree of Life design from mystic Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. And then on the back is the quote from a well-known 20th century science fiction author, Joseph Campbell: "All the gods, all the heavens, all the hells are within you." And when you start analyzing the symbols on the front side of the shirt, it's pretty clear that there was a different path intended for Justice League and for the DC cinematic universe.
Very much, but let's also make sure people realize that this t-shirt was designed for use by a charity organization to help stop teen suicides. Mm-hmm. What kind of message is that sending to these teens?
Yeah, this deals with immortality, resurrection, and so on. But in a broader sense, this is just the latest example of how the comics are being used to program our kids. Mm-hmm. The pagan religions of the ancient world have been mined for storylines for a long, long time. I mean, very first episode or edition of the Thor comics back in the 60s with Marvel featured Thor versus Hercules. Okay, so you got the storm god, who was Zeus and Baal, when you trace him back further, identified as Satan by Jesus in the New Testament.
Yes, and Hercules, who was the god vanquished on Mount Carmel.
Yeah, a demigod, or by definition, one of the Nephilim. So both of them identified as heroes by most kids today. Thor, I mean, the way he's played by Chris Hemsworth in the movies is great. We love watching the Thor films.
He's funny, he's entertaining.
Exactly, but that's the whole point. Draw kids in with characters they enjoy, they want to emulate, they relate to, or whatever, like the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series for young readers by Rick Riordan. And now other authors that are writing under his name. Disney has released
a brand.
Yeah, he's become a brand, like Tom Clancy, where the Mayan pantheon, Korean pantheon, the Hindu pantheon, Egyptian, Norse, the Olympians, all being used to tell stories about kids who discovered that they're demigods, and
with teachers' notes.
Yeah, teachers' notes, so that kids can study this in class, because, it's just literature. It gets kids to read. Again, it's programming. This is part of the biggest rebranding effort in history, where the gods of the ancient world, who God in the Bible calls gods, and in Psalm 82 passes judgment on them, they're going to die.
Small g gods.
Small g gods, created beings, not to be confused with the creator. But they've been rebranded as heroes for the generation coming up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kevin, you mentioned in another show about Jack Kirby and the Silver Surfer, and what the Silver Surfer actually represents. Chime in on that for me, if you will.
Yeah, he was actually, I guess Kirby's rendition of Christ. Of course, you had the god Galacticus, who made the Silver Surfer his herald, and of course he was cursed then to sort of fly above the airways, the prince of the power of air. He was sort of I guess you could say, he was a Christ sort of Lucifer in Jack Kirby's rendition of him. He saw Lucifer as being the savior, and as Galacticus, as the Silver Surfer rebelled against Galacticus, he cursed him that he was confined to Earth's atmosphere and couldn't return to his own planet. So that was Kirby's stories were all filled, and I think we mentioned even the Devil Dinosaur series he did for Marvel in the 70s. That had the tree of knowledge and good and evil with that computer tree, and he had his own story about the fall of man and ancient astronauts as well.
Wow.
Good grief. I hadn't realized that. We haven't watched that film. We tend to ignore the comics and actually watch the films because they've got a wider audience.
Yeah.
But it's clear that Superman is a Christ-like figure. And interesting, in the rebranding Superman, he's got a dark side to him.
Yeah, this Ubermensch. I did a little research the other day on the apotheosis, and I did a presentation where it also delves into the robotic side, the movie Metropolis. There's a term called machine mensch. And I got the Ubermensch now. It's just the same line, the correlation that runs between the false God man and the coming AI global brain, if you will. And
that's definitely true.
Yeah, and you'll see this in Brainiac and all this stuff. But going back to Superman, this false Christ, as we've been trying to expose for a while, although we enjoy the movies, we have to realize that he is a false Christ, just like Adam Warlock.
Exactly. And of course, Adam Warlock, they're saying he will probably, pretty soon make his Marvel debut. And, back, I heard you on your show talking about the DC comic, featuring Jesus. But the blasphemy has been going on for years. There's a issue of the Hulk 178. It actually features Adam Warlock, and it features him in a mock crucifixion in that issue of the Hulk. And like I said, that's dating back to the late 70s.
Oh,
can you do me a favor? There are some of our listeners, and yours are probably all really with it in regard. They're younger. We've got a lot of older listeners. Can you explain who Adam Warlock is for them, please?
Okay, Adam Warlock was sort of a demigod figure there in Marvel. He first appeared in the pages of Fantastic Four. Of course, that's where Kirby did a lot of his work. He brought the Silver Surfer from the Fantastic Four. He introduced the Black Panther, in the Fantastic Four, as well as a lot of people don't know that, but he was, he was I guess you could say, the brains about a lot of these creations that came from Marvel. And, it's been said that, he may have tapped into the other side, but Adam, he was originally known as him, and his first appearance was in Fantastic Four 66 and 67. And as I mentioned, he was sort of I guess, of course, the name Adam there, he's once again one of these, I guess, Messiah-like figures that Marvel likes to put on there. And, of course, he had appearances in Thor as well. But this Adam Warlock, he's sort of, I guess you could say, a man god. And he battled Thanos as well as other characters throughout the Marvel series.
Yeah.
66 and 67, it was a really interesting time period. Those of you who are younger, you really don't relate to this, but I grew up in that period. And I can tell you that dark and light was taking over. We had a big revival sweeping the nation. Not only in California, but elsewhere, but also at the same time, there was this massive inundation of darkness. I mean, we had the rise of the Church of Satan, and gave rise to the Process Church, and from there we had Crowley, was still influencing the Beatles. If you look at their Sgt. Pepper album, Crowley's on there 3 times. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of the rise of superstars like the Beatles who are advocating a move towards a pagan worship. So, having comic books, which are aimed at little kids, come out at the same time that explore the same issues. This is right at the heart of the enemy's plan.
Yeah, exactly. And a little bit about Adam Warlock as well in the Infinity Gauntlet, which turned into Avengers Infinity War. Totally different story. Adam Warlock was basically the hero of that story, and he told the superheroes that were left over from the war to go into the world and tell people that he can be trusted. He is
go into the world and preach the gospel.
Exactly.
Yeah, make disciples of all nations, huh?
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
So in that storyline, what happened after the big snap? Was there one?
Yeah, there was a snap. Yeah, and it's a long explanation, but there was a snap, and half the universe was taken out, and basically you had the Eternals, all these cosmic godlike beings come in to fight Thanos, and you had the appearance of Mephisto, who is really Satan. You had Gamora's sister, who actually got the gauntlet, and then something happened to her. I can't remember, but it's a long explanation about that whole storyline. Go ahead. Well,
again, the comics, as Sharon said, right now are not nearly as influential as they were 50 years ago. When I was a kid, my cousins and I were all about reading the Marvel and especially Marvel. I wasn't as much a DC fan, but Kirby, as you mentioned, Kevin, is one of the really influential characters in the history of both DC and Marvel comics in bringing these really Gnostic themes into the comics. And that's really what's being mined for the DC universe and for the Marvel cinematic universe right now. The comics themselves have been so changed that the publishing divisions are kind of dying on the vine. Superman, Thor is a woman now, and they've done all these weird things to really pander to social justice, what's politically correct in the social justice world, and the traditional comics audience, which are basically geeky guys, are sick of it, and so they're not reading that stuff anymore. They've moved over to video games, and really another follow-up show that ought to be explored is these kind of themes in video games.
Oh yeah,
and that's an area where I've got no experience whatsoever. I kind of tapped out after Super Smash Brothers.
Yeah, I tapped out after Zelda. So.
Well, for both audiences, we are planning a big expose on video games.
Excellent,
because I play some still, and I've seen some really occult stuff coming in, especially in Call of Duty. But so in the meantime, I guess we can get back to this Zack Snyder shirt and what all this stuff means.
But before we leave the Jack Kirby, though, I told Chris earlier that was the one thing that really slapped me in the face with the Justice League movie was the Jack Kirby influence. I mean, as soon as Steppenwolf came on the scene there with those horns, I was like, that is Kirby. And, of course, he was the one that created Steppenwolf and the New Gods for DC, as
and
well
he also
as
did Batman, didn't he?
Mother Box. Excuse me?
Didn't Kirby also create Batman?
Yes. I mean, he was Marvel and DC, and he created the Mother Boxes as well. So his handwriting is all over this Justice League movie.
Funny thing about that whole movie with Steppenwolf, that seemed weak. It's like portraying our typical vision of Satan as, okay, he's pretty weak, pretty easily conquered.
Yeah, it's true. And what the funny thing is about the Mother Box is in the Justice League movie, Steppenwolf worshipped the Mother Box like a triune god. It was three of them. And I don't think many people caught on to that. Yeah.
Yes.
That's really interesting. I hadn't noticed that. Good catch.
Yeah. So I guess we could let's talk about Superman's S. What does that mean?
Superman. I mentioned earlier that he is definitely a Christ-like figure. I mean, he at least in the Chris Reeves version of the films back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, he came down in this big rock, which is just like Mithras, and might even be like a god who was once worshipped at Petra.
Yeah.
He crashed in a meteorite or a rock that is later known as the Black Rock and sometimes worshipped as the Kaaba. This idea of a savior-like being emerging out of a stone that comes from the heavens is an old one.
Right.
Yeah, the ancient world, and especially in the Mediterranean world, it was common for people to worship stones that were meteoritic. But there was a belief among the Greeks that the sky god Uranus, whose reign was cut short along with his parts by Kronos, with a sickle.
Ouch!
When Kronos and the Titans rebelled, Uranus supposedly created animated stones, which the Greeks called Baetylia, Baetylia. And these stones were supposed to help Uranus in some way against Kronos. Didn't work, obviously. But the worship of these stones continued. It was believed that the essence of the god was contained in these stones. And that was passed down, inherited by the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula. There was the black stone that was worshipped as part of the Kaaba.
And a slight twisting on the word Kaaba gives you, well, you could say a cube, but it also gives this idea of a virgin giving birth. Right.
There was a 4th century bishop on the island of Cyprus who wrote that at Petra, the Arabs at Petra, worshipped a god that they believed was born of a virgin. This god called Dushara, which means Lord or one of the Shara Mountains. That's Seir, a reference to ancient Edom. And he probably, according to scholars, misheard or misunderstood the Arabic word for virgin, or he heard the Arabic word for virgin, which is Ka'iba, instead of the word for cube, which is Kaaba. And because he thought, he assumed perhaps that the Arabs at Petra were worshiping a god born of a virgin as a mockery of Jesus. Instead, they were worshiping, because the Arabs didn't believe in representing their gods, their idols, as anthropomorphic entities. They would create these cubes or these blocks or these just geometric shapes, and that represented the god. They didn't believe you could represent a deity in anthropomorphic form. So you had this cube representing Dushara, and then apparently this black stone was part of that stone. In fact, we're going to do some more research on this, but there's good evidence to believe that the original black stone, the original Kaaba, was not at Mecca, but it was at Petra. So,
spoilers.
Yeah. So anyway, but that relates back to this god who fell from the sky. But the key here is that this word Baetylia, and the modern English word is betyl, B-E-T-Y-L, which is the word scholars use for these god blocks at Petra and other places, comes from the Hebrew Beit El, or Bethel.
House of El, and that brings us back to the House of El on Krypton.
Yes.
The symbol of their house is that sort of stylized S over a shield. And on that Zack Snyder t-shirt image, you see it superimposed over Sol Invictus.
The S, by the way, has changed over the years. It used to be clear that was an S with a serif on the top, but the way it's been modified now, it looks more like a dragon.
Yes, very much so.
Right. Yeah. And it's confirmed that this S is a snake. and in modern times, like you said, a dragon. You can see it all over the t-shirts when you go buy certain memorabilia. Go ahead.
But you're right. The representation now over Sol Invictus at the top of this tree of life,
which is also the pommel of a sword.
Yes, yes. I even bothered to translate the Greek inscription on the pommel of the sword. But there is Greek there.
I did see that, and I can't remember now what it said. Oh, old brain shutting down.
But there are clearly symbols that represent the other.
I think it had something to do with he is coming or he comes or something like that.
Okay. Representing the other members of the Justice League, there's the Wonder Woman logo, there's the Flash logo, Aquaman, Batman down at the bottom. And then here, I've got it brought up here, the representation at the bottom of an infant.
Mm-hmm. And probably is the child of Lois and Clark Kent, a demigod.
Exactly.
Right. And for people that didn't see any of the movies, from Man of Steel to Batman versus Superman to Justice League, Clark is supposed to turn evil. It was given by time travel from the Flash to Batman. And Batman also had a dream about the whole evil Superman killing people and siding with Darkseid, which is another representation of Satan. So I'm just giving you some preface here so you can understand why we're talking about this. Go ahead.
Yeah. There's the coffin down there at the base, at the point of the sword. As you go down through the sword runs through a globe with an alpha, the Greek character alpha on it. Below it is
the Omega.
The Omega, and a round table with 6 swords in it.
Which evokes Arthurian legend.
Yes. And then at the base of the sword, the point of the sword, is a coffin with a W on it, presumably meaning Wayne, Bruce Wayne, Batman. So, and that's just above the Batman logo at the bottom of this tree of life image that Zack Snyder created, and then below that is the fetus, basically the baby in the womb, apparently. So, what are they trying to say here? Is Batman reborn through the child of Lois and Clark? Does Batman become a demigod with actual superpowers?
Well, what I've read is that his name was going to be Bruce, even though it's not that in the comics, that he was going to be called Bruce in the films.
Right. There are comic books out there where Batman does become a god by some outside force, I think a chair or something like that. And yeah, but anyway, he does become a god eventually. And
he's an interesting character because he's not a god on his own. He's not like Thor or Superman who comes from another planet. He's a human who enhances himself through technology.
Right. And you mentioned Above and Below. There's actually a comic book series that bridged, I believe, Man of Steel to Batman versus Superman. And one of the comics in the series it says upstairs, downstairs, relating to this as above, so below issue. So it's quite interesting, all of the esoteric knowledge they put in this stuff. And again, with the rise of Satanism, occultism in America, it's becoming the fastest rising religion in America, overshadowing Christianity with millennials. This stuff, it does influence these people, especially Harry Potter series and all that stuff. That's another story. So, but I want to just mention really quickly, you said something about the cube and all these things, and I'm going to just run down a series of movies here that have and ideas like Pandora's box. When you open it, it unleashes terrible evil. You have the Hellraiser cube in the movie Hellraiser. Yes. Right? You have you have Star Wars Clone Wars, where they have a cube and a pyramid, which could be used as a communication device. Now the cube in astrophysics and stuff is really a representation of dimensions, maybe 12 or something like that, as they say we possibly have. So think of it in those terms also. And you have the Tesseract from the Avengers, which is a cube. It's the space stone, and it's able to
4-dimensional.
Yeah, and it's alive, by the way. It's alive.
Like the Borg.
Yes, exactly. I was about going to say the cube
that's another
from the
one.
Borg.
Right, exactly. Then you have the Allspark and Transformer. There goes that word spark. the spark of divinity, right? The all-spark, it's a cube. And in the movie, it said before time began, there was a cube. So this cube is a godlike figure in the Transformer movies, right? Now, then a cube came from space in the movie Rampage, and this cube was able to manipulate the DNA of animals, right? Then in the movie The Box, this guy got hit with lightning, and they gave him this box to go test people, and it was also a dimensional transport device to take people in a cult-like fashion to some sort of other dimensional. This was given to him by aliens. Okay. Then you have Prometheus, where you have a Rubik's Cube like holographic visualizer. And the funniest thing is in Dude, Where's My Car? There's a Rubik's Cube that transforms.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, it transforms
Gospel according to Dude.
Yeah. It transforms into a continuum transfiguration or something like that. Anyway, so that's my rundown. And there's much more I could have mentioned, but I know that time is short.
Strange. We use a variation on that in the 2001 movies. They're not cubes. It's those tall, gosh, what are they called again?
The monolith.
Monolith, yeah.
They affect DNA.
Yeah, exactly. Anything you want to mention, Kevin?
Well, you just there's also the Cosmic Cube that was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And that appeared in some early Tales of Suspense, as well as some early Captain Americas. And that run a thread through the Thanos stories as well in the Captain Marvel series.
Exactly. Yes. So, I mean, we see all of these correlations, these convergences at some point, right? And I just want to mention something from Batman versus Superman here. Many people don't know that Lex Luthor is and always has been a representation of Aleister Crowley. That's why in Batman versus Superman, he blasphemes God like no tomorrow. And he even mentions like Clark Kent was sort of like Jehovah. Okay, so it's running through. But Lex Luthor, he did a blood ritual in Batman versus Superman to bring forth Doomsday. He took the body of Zod, put it in the cryo chamber, slit his wrist, not his wrist, but his palm, to let blood go so that there could be this, I don't know the scientific term, but the melding of the genes or whatever. And they formed Doomsday out of that. A blood ritual.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Wow.
Interesting, too, that one of the little notes on this Zack Snyder design is AC-23.
Yeah, 23
chromosomes. AC, Aleister Crowley, but also AC-23 referring to Action Comics issue 23, which was the first appearance of Lex Luthor.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And it's right next to the all-seeing eye, which is casting its gaze upon the globe with the alpha on it.
23 is also one of those numbers that is shorthand for 666.
Wow.
2/3, right? Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
Which was the number that Crowley said applied to himself. He referred to himself as the Beast.
Right.
In fact, his mother called him the Beast.
And interesting, at the end of the Justice League film, Luthor, who had a full head of hair through the whole thing, decides to shave his head.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that.
Which was the way Gene Hackman, and the way he was always depicted in the comics, but yeah,
folks, if you've not watched the most recent films, Superman films, these are not your daddy's and your granddaddy's Superman.
No. George Reeves sadly is
George Reeves and Chris Reeves, both. They're turning in their graves.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it used to be very entertaining and lighthearted, but not anymore. Superman is very dark, even in the Batman even in Man of Steel. It opens with him essentially crash banging everything.
Right, and another important thing to mention in about Man of Steel and the whole series is Superman came with the genes of his ancestors in his blood.
Exactly, all of them are within him.
Right.
Yes, all the gods, all of heaven and all of hell are within you.
Exactly,
right.
And he was supposed to impregnate a human woman, and out of that would become a race of Supermen. This is what Aleister Crowley envisioned, a race of Supermen that would basically become the golden age of man and the dawn of the new age, the age of Horus, who supposedly visited his wife or him, and all sorts of weird stuff happened, right?
Yes, exactly. And there's the new rise of the Superman that's out there. And I can't remember if it's a cartoon. Is it a cartoon?
Yes, it's a cartoon DVD. Yes, it is. So that, you know, this whole gene experiment that's going on in reality, and the stuff going on inside of ufology with these abductions, and they're always doing some sexual experiment. It all ties in somehow, because most of this is coming from the demonic realm. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it comes down to. As we said earlier on, this is all just a massive rebranding campaign that's been ongoing since the beginning of time.
Absolutely. And Kevin, any last word before we end?
Yeah, and as you mentioned UFOs, I wanted to add that, you know, the very origin of the Justice League, as they came together, was to, you know, put down a alien invasion from outer space. So that's even how the team formed in the comic books.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just the same thing in Avengers, and you'll see this all over the place when you take a really good circumspect look. And I just want to thank you for joining us tonight, Sharon and Derek, giving your input. And I hope that people really get what we're trying to say here. We're not trying to tell you what to watch or how to watch it, or if you should or shouldn't watch it. That's between you and God. But when you realize that something is wrong, you need to do something about it. And we just thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I want you to think of a time when you had control over your mind. Now think of a time when you let anything into your subconscious. Have we been led to a critical junction by unseen forces? What does this mean for the future of mankind? What have you been trained to believe about UFOs and aliens? Have you been deceived? Are you waiting for something to show up? In this groundbreaking documentary film, the veil will be lifted, your eyes will be open, as the truth is exposed like never before. We are not alone, but they are not what you think. Disclosure is near, so what will be the event? The one event that will fool the global population in the last days? Find out soon as we uncover the alien deception. Entertainment Frontlines.
If you like our videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all our frequent updates.